Welcome to Male Revenge, where good men are pushed too far, and the Lord settles every debt in the end. The good book promises, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord, I will repay." Today, that promise is tested to its limit. This is the story of an old man, his family, and a wound 30 years deep. Keep the faith and stay to the end. It all began one cold night in October, in the rain. My boy was sitting on a wet curb in a freezing October rain. And my 5-year-old grandson was shaking in his arms like a sparrow knocked clean out of its nest. 3 suitcases sat in a puddle beside them, soaked through. I had pulled my old truck to the shoulder before I even knew I was doing it. And when I rolled the window down, my son looked up at me. And the rain was not the only thing running down his face. "Dad," he said, and his voice cracked like dry kindling. "I'm finished." I did not shout. I did not put my fist through the dash, though the Lord knows a part of me wanted to. I just smiled. A small, cold smile. And it cost me more than anyone watching that street could have guessed. Then I reached across and unlocked the door. "Get in the truck," I said. "Both of you." A man named Roland Ashby had thrown my son and my grandchild out into the street that afternoon like they were last week's trash. He had told my boy the Calloway name was a stain on his family, not fit to sit at his table. Ashby believed he had run astray off his porch. He had no notion that he had just declared war on the one man in the whole county who quietly held the deed to the ground his whole kingdom was built upon. My name is Henry Calloway. Most folks call me Hank. I am 62 years old, a widower, a wheat farmer, and once, a long while back, the mayor of a little Kansas town called Cedar Hollow. 3 years ago, I held my wife's hand while the life went out of her, and she asked me for one thing. "Keep this family together, Hank," she said, "no matter what comes." I told her I would. There was a verse Ruth used to read me of an evening, the 37th Psalm. "Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him." I had spent 30 years learning how to wait. I did not yet know how hard that one promise was about to be tested. Before I tell you how an old farmer brought a rich man to his knees, do me one kindness. If you have ever been looked straight through like a pane of glass, judged by the dirt on your boots instead of the weight of your word, then tap that subscribe button and tell me about it down in the comments. I would like to hear your story too. To the people of Cedar Hollow, I am nobody much anymore. I ran this town for 8 years once, but folks have short memories. Now they see an old man who grows wheat past the river and brews a little beer in a barn, and they figure there is nothing under the hood worth knowing. For a good many years, I have let them think it. Quiet pays. Noise is expensive. Working the ground teaches a man patience. Some seed you put down in the fall and do not see again until it breaks through come spring. I had planted a great deal and waited a long while. I had been out near the old bottomland that afternoon, walking a piece of ground I keep my eye on, when the sky went the color of a deep bruise and the rain came down in long gray sheets. I was taking the long way home when I saw them, and I will tell you, no sight under heaven cuts a father deeper than his own child broken down on the side of the road. My son Adam is 34, a surgeon, a fine one, with steady hands and a gentle heart. Too gentle, maybe, for the family he married into. He fell in love with Grace Ashby, daughter of Roland Ashby, the biggest name in real estate in the state. Ashby is a smiling kind of dangerous. The sort of man who shakes your hand warm while he reads the price tag on your soul. I warned my boy. The Lord knows I warned him. But love has a way of stopping a man's ears against every bell ringing in his head. "Why are you not at the hospital, son?" I asked, keeping my voice level as still water. "Where is Grace?" He looked down at his shaking hands. "I lost everything, Dad," he whispered. "They suspended my license this morning over a made-up complaint. It's a lie, but it doesn't matter. Ashby made sure of it. Then he called me into his study and told me I was poison in his family tree, that our blood wasn't fit to mix with his." I sat there a moment, and the old thing stirred in my chest, the thing I had buried so deep I had near forgot it had a name. I had let a man trample this family once before, a long time ago. I had stayed quiet, and the staying quiet had cost me more than I have ever said out loud. I thought, not this time. As God is my witness, not this time. Little Eli peeked out from under his father's soaked coat. "Grandpa," he said, his teeth chattering, "I'm so cold. I want to go home." And something in my chest went very still. Not hot, not loud, still. The way the air goes still right before the sky opens up. "We're going home, little man," I said, soft, for the boy. "Grandpa's got you now." Ruth would have had him warm and laughing inside a minute. I was never the soft one she was. But I would tend what she left me, or break trying. Adam loaded the soaked suitcases into the truck bed and climbed in, holding his son against his chest. The engine caught with its old rattle, and as I pulled away, I looked once more toward the Ashby place, up on its rise above the river. Every window lit like it had never known a dark hour in its life. I thought, "You believe you just kicked a stray dog out into the rain, Roland. You have no idea you just woke a sleeping lion." The wipers kept time with the storm the whole way home, and Adam did not say a word. He sat with Eli asleep against his chest and watched the dark wheat country slide past the glass. A man riding to a place he was ashamed to be going. I let the quiet be. Some hurts need silence before they can stand any words. And the Lord knows I had ridden home in my own grief enough times to know it. But there was a thing he did not know, sitting beside me in that rattling old truck. Every mile of that road I was already at work. The way a farmer is at work in January, when the fields look dead and the ground gives no sign. I thought, "You have no notion, son, that the country we are driving across answers to me. And before the spring comes, it is going to answer for what was done to you today." "You never did ask me how I came to own this farm," I said. "All these acres past the river." He let out a tired breath. "Dad, this is not the night for one of your stories." I just smiled and kept my eyes on the road. He thought I was an old man talking to fill the dark. He did not know that a man can carry a great weight in two cracked hands and never once let it show in his face. Here's the plain truth of it. Folks look at a fellow with hands like mine and a truck that rattles, and they figure they have read the whole book by its cover. It never crosses their minds that the man mending the fence might own the land on both sides of it. 8 years in the mayor's chair taught me where every dollar in this county sleeps and which ones are lonesome. I never used that to climb. I used it to buy. A flooded 40 here, a foreclosed quarter section there, the ground other men walked away from. I called it Granary Holdings, after the place where you store what you grow so it carries you through the winter. And it is run by an old farmer in a barn coat that not one of those proud families would know at the feed store. I turned off the county road onto the gravel lane, and the headlights swung across the dark shape of the brewing barn I call Old Sentinel. At the end of the lane sat the house, A plain wooden place. The paint gone gray and curling. The porch leaning a little, where I never got around to fixing it. I watched the shame creep over Adam's face the moment he saw it. He was thinking of the marble floors he had been thrown off of that morning, thinking he had dragged his own boy from a mansion to a shack. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. "I never wanted to bring Eli here. The roof probably leaks." "It's a roof," I said. "And it's paid for. No man on this earth can knock on that door and tell you that you are not fit to stand inside it. You hold on to that." What he could not see, what nobody had ever seen, was that the peeling paint was a choice, and the leaning porch a costume. And under those very floorboards, in a place no thief would ever think to look, sat the deeds to more of this county than Roland Ashby would dare to dream of. I had carried that secret so long it had grown into me, the way the ache settles into an old man's knees when the weather turns. We carried Eli in and laid him on the old quilted chair by the stove, the one Ruth picked out at a church rummage sale more than 20 years back. I got the furnace going, and the tired old beast in the cellar clanked and grumbled before it pushed warm air through the vents. Adam stood in the middle of the small front room, lost, a grown man who had wandered back into his boyhood and could not find the floor under his feet. Over the mantel hung a photograph of Ruth, laughing, her head tipped back, the summer light caught in her hair. 3 years gone, and the house still listened for her step. I had got used to that quiet, the way you get used to a missing tooth, running your tongue over the empty place without meaning to. But that night, with my boy and his boy under my roof again, the quiet felt different. It felt like the house had been holding its breath, waiting on something. Adam looked up at his mother's face, and his shoulders began to shake. "She always believed in you," I told him, "from the day you were born. She used to say you had healing in your hands." He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. "A lot of good it did me," he said. "They took my license. They took my home. They took my name. Dad, what kind of man can't keep a roof over his own son's head?" I wanted to tell him the truth right then. I wanted to tell him everything. Who I was, what I held, what I meant to do about it. But there is a time to keep silence and a time to speak, the good book says, and a field does not bring in its harvest all at once. So I only laid my hand on his shoulder. "The kind of man," I said, "who is about to find out what he is truly made of." And right then, as those words left my mouth, a sound cut through the warm hum of the house. It was a phone, buzzing and lighting up the dim room from where it lay on one of the wet suitcases. Not mine. Adam went pale and stared at it like a man staring at a coiled rattlesnake. "It's him," he said. "It's Ashby." "Answer it," I said, "and put it on speaker." Adam's hand shook as he reached for the phone. He swiped the screen and pressed the button, and the voice of Roland Ashby came into my farmhouse, smooth and unhurried, the way warm honey runs off a spoon. "Adam," it said, "I have been worried about you, son." That voice was a marvel. There was no heat in it at all. It was kind. It was the voice of a man laying a clean trap with gentle hands. And if you did not know better, you would have thanked him while he said it. "I am a reasonable man," Ashby went on. "So let me make this simple. My lawyers are sending papers tonight. A divorce. Clean and quiet. You sign them, give up any claim to my daughter and the child she carries. And I will see to it you land somewhere soft. A little apartment. A fresh start." Adam swallowed. "Where is Grace?" he asked. "Let me talk to my wife." And there, just there, the honey turned. I heard it the way you hear the first crack of ice on a pond come spring. a small sound that means the whole sheet is about to give. "Grace is resting," Ashby said, and the warmth drained clean out of him. "She has had a trying day, watching her husband disgrace this family. Now you listen to me. If you do not sign, I will bury you so deep the sun will lose your name. I have already taken your license. I will have custody of that boy by Friday. I have judges who have owed me favors for 20 years, and I will prove to every one of them you are an unfit, unemployed, homeless failure. And I will scrub every drop of your blood out of that child until he cannot recall he ever had a father." I watched my son come apart. And then Ashby said the thing that turned the stillness in my chest colder than a grave dug in January. "You were a mistake from the start," he said. "Bad blood always tells. I had a man look your people up. Your mother, Ruth Calloway, a waitress who poured coffee at a diner and married a fellow who slops around a barn and once played mayor of a town nobody has heard of. That is the stock you crawled out of, and I will not have it watering down mine. Now, I have swallowed a great many insults in my time. I have been called boy by men half my age, and looked clean through like window glass. I let it run off the way rain runs off a tin roof. For the good book says a soft answer turns away wrath. But Ruth had been 3 years in the ground, and this man had just reached down into her grave to wipe his boots on her name. I felt the old wrath rise in me then, hot and black. And I am not too proud to tell you, it frightened me. Ruth had a verse underlined in her Bible, in soft pencil. "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will repay." I thought, Lord, I am trying to leave it to you. But a part of me wants to repay this myself. I reached over and took the phone out of Adam's shaking hand. "Dad, no," he mouthed. I held the phone up and let the quiet sit a moment. The way you let a field lie fallow before you turn it. "Ashby," I said. A pause. "Who is this?" the voice asked, put out that anyone new had dared step in. "This is Henry Calloway, Adam's father. The fellow who slops around a barn, as you put it. I have one thing to say to you tonight." A laugh, slow and amused. "Well now, the dirt found its tongue. Did you crawl up out of the field to defend the boy? Almost sweet, but save your wind, old man. There is nothing a fellow like you can do to a man like me. You are a beetle, looking up at the sole of my shoe." "You may be right," I said, and I kept my voice low and level as still water. "But here is a thing a man learns, farming. Whatever you spend your whole life looking down on, that is the very thing that comes up out of the ground beneath you. And you have spent your whole life looking down." "You talk in riddles, old man. I have no time for the philosophy of farmers." "That's all right," I said. "You'll understand it by harvest. You spoke my wife's name tonight. Ashby. Ruth. You dragged it through your mouth like something filthy. So do me a kindness. Write that name down, and keep it close. Because before this is through, you are going to wish to God you had never learned how to say it." For the first time, the smooth voice caught. Just for half a second. "Is that a threat?" "No," I said. "It's a weather forecast. There's a storm coming, Ashby. And you built your whole life on the lowest ground in the county, where the water always goes." The vine went dead. I set the phone down gentle on the table, the way Ruth used to set down her good plates. The silence came rushing back, broken only by the rain on the roof and the soft breathing of my sleeping grandson. Adam stared at me like he had never laid eyes on me before. "Dad," he whispered, "what was that?" You can't talk to a man like Ashby that way. He'll come after you, too. He'll take the farm, the truck, all of it. We have nothing to fight him with." I looked at my son, at the dark phone, and thought of the long road about to open up before us. "Get some sleep, son," I said, rising slow, my old knees cracking in the quiet. "Tend to your boy. Tomorrow you go out and hold your head high." "And where will you be?" he asked. "I'll be making a phone call of my own," I said. I waited until the house had gone quiet, until Adam's breathing settled into the slow rhythm of a man too tired to dream, and Eli lay curled on Ruth's old chair, thumb near his mouth the way he slept as a baby. Then I pulled on my coat and went out into the storm. The rain had eased to a cold drizzle, and the wind carried the yeasty smell of the brewing barn across the yard. Old Sentinel, I call it. A long, low building where I make a little beer nobody in town thinks twice about. That is the thing about a brewery. A man sees a harmless hobby and never once wonders what is at work inside those tanks, in the dark. I let myself in and walked past them, to steel shelves stacked with barley. I pulled the third shelf, and the whole rack swung loose on a hidden hinge. Behind it was a door. Most folks in Cedar Hollow would have laughed to see what lay behind it. It was a small room, dry and cool, lit by a single bulb. Against one wall stood a steel safe taller than I am. On a plain desk sat a telephone, a secure line that runs through no tower a man like Ashby could reach. And in those drawers and on those shelves sat the true shape of my life. Ledgers, deeds, titles to land in 4 counties. Notes held against half the fine businesses in the region. A good many owned by families who believed they answered to no one. Granary holdings, all of it, run out of a hidden room behind a stack of barley by an old man in a barn coat. I had built it the way the yeast builds, quiet and unseen, season after season. Until one day you lift the lid and find the thing has grown strong enough to move the world a little. But that night I did not open the safe for the deeds. I opened it for a photograph. It was old, the colors gone soft. A man standing lean and proud before a green valley with a creek running through the heart of it. My father, Jacob Calloway. That valley was ours once, the best bottomland in the county. Ground my great-grandfather cleared with his own hands. I will not tell you tonight how we lost it, or who took it, or what it did to my father in the end. That is a wound I have kept covered a long while. I will only say it is not green anymore. There are big houses on it now, behind a stone gate, and a sign that reads, Ashby Ridge. I sat with my father's picture a long moment. I thought, I let them take it once, Pa. I was young and proud, and I told myself there would come a better time to fight. There never was. I will not make that mistake twice. Then I set the picture down, and I picked up the phone, and I dialed the one man left alive who knows what I am. He answered on the second ring, his voice rough with sleep. Hank, it is the middle of the night. Somebody had better be dead. Nobody is dead yet, David, I said. But a man named Roland Ashby threw my son and my grandson into the rain today. And he made a mistake doing it. He told my boy our blood was not fit to mix with his. David Sinclair has been my attorney and friend for 30 years. And he has kept my secret the way a deacon keeps a confession. I heard him go quiet, then heard the bed creak as he sat up, wide awake. All right, he said. Tell me what you need. 2 things. First, start buying Ashby's paper, quietly, through the shells. Nothing with my name near it. He is leveraged to the eaves on that resort down south. I want to own his debt before he knows there is a buyer in the room. I heard a pen scratching. And the second, they suspended Adam's license this morning over a complaint that is a lie from the first word. Somebody built it. Ashby does not soil his own hands with such work. He keeps a man for it, a fixer named Russell Kane. I want to know exactly how that complaint was made. Every signature, every date, in writing. When David spoke again, his voice had changed. There was worry in it. Hank, I will do all of it. You know I will. But I have to say this as your friend, not your lawyer. He drew a breath. The day you start buying that man's debt, the day you pull on Kane's threads, Ashby is going to feel the floor move under him. And he will go looking for who is doing it. For 30 years you have been a ghost in this county. The minute you move on him, the ghost takes a shape, and he will come at it with everything he owns. At the farm, at the boy. I looked at my father's photograph, and at the bulb throwing my shadow long against the wall. The good book says there is nothing covered that shall not be revealed, nothing hid that shall not be known. I had spent my whole life living the hidden half of that verse. Now I was about to live the other half, and there would be no covering it back once it was done. Let him come, David, I said, quieter than I felt. Buy the paper. Pull the threads. I hung up the phone. Roland Ashby believed he had set a clock ticking over my family that night. A hearing on Friday. A countdown to the day he took the last thing we had. He was a clever man, sitting up in his lit house on the hill, certain he had us on the run. But he had counted the wrong clock. Because down in a hidden room that smelled of barley and cold rain, an old farmer had just quietly wound another one. And that clock was not ticking over my family at all. It was ticking over his. The next morning, the sun did not bother to show its face. It left the sky the color of dishwater and let a thin, cold light leak over the wheat fields. And somehow, that suited the day that was coming. Adam was up before me. I found him at the kitchen table in his one good shirt, the collar pressed flat with his hands because we had no iron worth the name, going over a list of clinics and hospitals on a scrap of paper. There was hope in his face that morning, and it near broke my heart to look at it, because I knew a thing he did not. I knew that hope was a lamb, and Roland Ashby had already sent the wolves out ahead of it. There is a family practice over in Haines County that is short a doctor, he said, folding the paper into his pocket. And a clinic up north. Somebody will give me a chance. Dad, I am a good surgeon. My record speaks for itself. It surely does, son, I said. Go on then. Hold your head up. He was gone the whole day. I spent it out at Old Sentinel, turning the work over in my mind the way you turn compost, and waiting. He came home after dark. I have seen men come home from a hard day, and men come home from a funeral. But I had never seen my boy's face look the way it looked when he came through that door. The hope had been scrubbed clean off it. What happened? I asked, though the Lord knows I already knew. He sat down heavy at the table and stared at his hands. The first place, the man was glad to see me. Shook my hand. Said my record was the best he had seen in years. Said he would have me start Monday. Then he stepped out to make a call. Just one call. Dad. He came back, and he would not look at me. Said the position had been filled. He at least had the decency to look ashamed. And the others, the same. Everyone. By the third place, they did not even pretend. A woman at the front desk told me, kindly, that I should stop trying in this part of the state. She said a man had been calling ahead of me all morning. She would not say who. She did not have to. He looked up, and something had come loose in his eyes. He is not going to let me work, Dad. Not anywhere. He is going to keep me from feeding my own son, and he is going to do it from a leather chair without ever raising his voice. And there it is. That is how a man like Roland Ashby kills you. Not with a knife in an alley. He does it from a clean office, with a telephone and a smile. He never has to see your face. He simply makes his calls, and one by one the doors of the world swing shut, until a good man with healing in his hands cannot earn a loaf of bread. There is no blood. There is no fingerprint. Just a quiet, patient strangling, and a man left to wonder how the air got so thin. I set a plate of food in front of my son and told him to eat. Then I went back out to the barn. Coaches, there are kinds of anger a man ought not to let his children see on his face. David Sinclair called me on the secure line near midnight. "I found your complaint," he said. "It is a forgery, Hank, top to bottom. But it was filed under a real name, a man on the state medical board. Gerald Voss." "Tell me about him." "Voss is a drowning man. Gambling debts, a second mortgage, a daughter's tuition he cannot make. And every one of those notes was quietly bought up 2 years back by a shell that traces, if you dig far enough, to Ashby. They own him. When Cain came calling and told him to put his name to a complaint against Adam, Voss did not have a no left in him. So there it was. Russell Cain, Ashby's fixer, had built the lie, and a broken man named Voss had signed it. I sat with that a moment. "There is one more thing," David said, and his voice slowed. "I had a man speak to Voss. Quiet. Voss said something strange. He said that when Cain handed him the papers, Cain could not look him in the eye either. Said Cain told him, real low, that this one was not his idea, and that he was sorry. Then he made him sign anyway." I turned that over a long while after we hung up. A fixer who says he is sorry while he ruins you. A man doing the devil's work with a piece of his soul still arguing about it. I have lived long enough to know what that is. That is a crack in a wall. And a crack, given time and a little water, can bring down the whole thing. I stood at the barn door a long time, looking out at the dark fields. I will tell you something I have not told many people. The real reason I built Granary, underneath all the others, was so that I would never again stand helpless while a rich man took everything from someone I loved. I failed at that once, a long time ago. I built an empire in the dark so that I would be ready the day it came around again. Well, it had come around. Ruth's old Bible says, "Fret not thyself because of evildoers, for they shall soon be cut down like the grass." I am a patient man, and a farmer besides, so I know a thing or two about cutting down grass. I looked toward the far lights of the town, where Ashby slept easy in a big house on stolen ground. And I said it quiet, to him and to my father and to the Lord, all at once. It will not be much longer now. The old phone on the kitchen wall has a ring on it like a fire bell. And when it went off a little after 2 in the morning, it tore the whole house wide open. I was up and across the cold floor before my mind had caught up with my feet. A call at that hour is never good news. A man my age knows that in his bones. "Hello," I said. For a moment there was nothing but breathing, fast and frightened. Then a whisper, so small I had to press the phone hard against my ear. "Mr. Calloway, it is Grace. Please, Is Adam there? I heard Adam's bare feet hit the floor in the next room. He had heard the bell too. He came into the kitchen with his hair wild, and I held up a hand to keep him still. I am here. Grace, I said gentle. Adam is right here. What has happened, child? Her voice came in pieces, the way water comes through a cracked dam. He has locked me in. My own father. There is a bolt on the outside of my door, and he has had bars put on the window like I am some kind of animal. He took my phone. I am calling on an old one I hid. A sob. Mr. Calloway, he brought a doctor here tonight, to the house. He says the baby is a mistake, that it carries bad blood, and that he is going to make the problem go away whether I agree to it or not. And if I fight him, he says he has papers ready to declare I am not in my right mind. He will put me away somewhere, and no one will ever ask a single question. Then, fierce through the fear, she said one thing more. I will not let him take my baby. I would sooner die. I have heard a great many wicked things in my life. But standing there in the dark in my sock feet, listening to that brave, terrified girl, I felt something cold and old move through me. That baby was my blood too, my own grandchild. And the same fire I had spent most of my life learning to bank came roaring up in me then, hot enough to frighten me. I made the mistake of letting Adam see my face. He read it the way only a son can read a father, and he crossed the kitchen in 2 steps and took the phone from my hand. Grace, Grace, I am coming. Do you hear me? I am coming right now. He hung up before I could stop him. He was already grabbing his keys off the hook, already shoving his feet into his boots, and his face had gone to a place I knew too well. A red and roaring place where a man quits thinking and starts only burning. Adam, I said, get out of my way. Dad, his voice shook. He has my wife in a cage. He means to kill my child. I will drive over there and put my hands around his throat, and I will not stop until I am an old man. But my hands are still a farmer's hands. And I took him by both arms and held him. And I did not let go. Look at me, I said. Look at me, son. He fought me a moment, then went still, his chest heaving. You listen to me now, and you listen good, because everything depends on this next minute. If you drive over there tonight, you are doing the one thing in this whole world that Roland Ashby wants you to do. He is praying you will come. He has guards. He has cameras. He has lawyers. The second you lay a hand on him, he quits being the villain, and you become it. You go to prison. Grace gets called a madwoman with no husband to speak for her. That baby is lost. And so is everything else. He wins it all, clean, and never even has to lie to do it. I felt the fight start to drain out of his arms. The good book says a man with no rule over his own spirit is like a city with its walls broke down. I said, quieter. Anybody at all can walk right in and take whatever they please. Do not you dare hand him your walls tonight. Not when we are this close. Then what do we do? He said, and his voice cracked like a boy's. We just leave her there. No, I said. We do not leave her there. We do not leave her one more hour. But we are going to do it in a way he cannot turn back around on us. We are going to do it with the law standing on our side of the line. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I have known by heart for 30 years. It rang twice, and a gruff voice answered, thick with sleep. This had better be good. Tom, I said. It is Hank Calloway. I am sorry to wake you, but I have got a pregnant woman locked in a room against her will, bars on the window, over at the Ashby place. Her own father has her caged and is threatening her life and the life of her child. I have got her on the record saying so. I need the law out there tonight, and I need it to be you, not one of those deputies that golf with the man." There was a silence on the line. Then I heard a bed creak, and boots hit a floor. And Tom Bridger said the words I was hoping to hear. "Give me 20 minutes. I will meet you on the county road." I hung up the phone. Adam was staring at me. The rage in him changed now into something else, something with hope laced through the fear. I took my coat down off the hook and tossed him his. "Put your coat on, son," I said. "We are going to go and bring your wife and child home." There are two worlds in this county, and that night I drove my son straight from one into the other. We left behind the world I know, the world of dirt lanes and leaning fences and porch lights left on for nobody. And we climbed the long paved road up to the world Roland Ashby had built for himself. The houses grew bigger and farther apart. The fields gave way to clipped lawns and iron fences. And at the top of it all, behind a wall of pale stone, sat his house, lit up gold against the night like a courthouse, or a prison, depending on which side of the gate you happen to stand. A scripture of Ruth's came to me as we pulled up to those tall iron gates. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? I have found that a man who has made his peace with the Lord and with himself does not rattle easy, no matter how high the wall." Two guards stood inside the gate, big men in dark coats. One of them ambled over and shone a flashlight in through my windshield, taking in my old truck and my older coat and the gray in my beard. "Property is private, Pop," he said, and grinned back at the other one. "Soup kitchen is in town. You and the boy best turn this thing around before it falls apart in the driveway." "I am here to see Mr. Ashby," I said, calm as a Sunday morning, "and to collect my daughter-in-law." That got a real laugh out of the both of them, but the noise had carried up to the house, and a light came on over the big front doors, and Roland Ashby himself stepped out onto the portico in a silk robe, a glass of something amber in his hand. Even at 3 a.m, even pulled from his bed, the man wore his contempt like a tailored suit. "Calloway," he called down, "pleasant as you please. You are trespassing on private property in the dead of night. I will give you one chance to crawl back into that truck before I have my men remove you. And believe me, old man, you do not want me to send for the sheriff." I looked up at him standing there on his bright porch, so sure of the ground beneath his feet. "Funny you should mention the sheriff," I said. Then I lifted my hand, and I counted, loud enough to carry across the yard. 3, 2, 1. And right on the word, the night behind us lit up red and blue. 3 county cruisers came roaring up that paved road with their lights spinning and their tires crying on the asphalt, and they slewed to a stop at the gate in a half circle, hemming his wall in light. Doors opened, and out of the lead car stepped Sheriff Tom Bridger, hat squared, hand resting easy on his belt, in no particular hurry at all. The grin fell clean off the guard's face. "Roland Ashby," Bridger called up, and his voice was flat and carrying. "I have a sworn statement that you are holding a woman against her will on this property. A pregnant woman, locked in a room with bars on the window. Now I can come up there and open that door myself, with these lights running and a reporter friend of mine I can have out here inside the hour. Or you can save us both the trouble and the headline. Your choice, sir." I watched it happen. I watched Roland Ashby do the one thing I do not believe he had done in 20 years. I watched him lose. It only showed for a second. a tightening around the eyes, a stillness in the hand that held the glass. He was a clever man, and he could do the arithmetic faster than most. A scandal like this, splashed across every paper in the state, would do more harm to that gleaming name of his than I ever could in a year. So he smiled, and he spread his hands, and the smoothness ran back over him like oil over water. "Sheriff, this is a private family matter and a sad misunderstanding," he said. "My daughter is unwell, but of course, open the gate. We are all reasonable people here." The gate swung open with a hum, and before it was halfway, a figure came flying out a side door of that great house. Barefoot on the cold stone, a thin robe pulled around her, and her belly round beneath it. Adam. My son was out of the truck and running before I could draw a breath. And they came together, there in the wash of red and blue light. And he wrapped her up, like a man folding his arms around his own beating heart. Grace turned to her father then, up on his porch, and through her tears, she said the bravest thing I heard that whole long winter. "I am not unwell, Daddy. I have never seen anything in my life more clearly. I would rather starve in a cold farmhouse with people who love me than spend one more night as a prisoner in your gold cage. I am keeping my baby, and I am going home with my husband." Roland Ashby said nothing at all. He simply turned and walked back inside, and the big doors closed behind him. We drove home in the gray light of almost morning. Grace asleep against Adam's shoulder. Safe. It was the first time we had taken something back from that man. It would not be the last. What none of us said out loud, riding home, was what was already moving in the dark while Ashby licked his wounds. Down in a quiet office, David Sinclair had just set his signature to a deal that closed a hand around the loan notes on Ashby Ridge itself. The proud man on the hill had lost his daughter that night. He simply did not know yet that he had begun to lose everything else. For a few days after that night at the gate, we had something I can only call a borrowed peace. Grace settled into the farmhouse like she had always belonged there. She took to wearing one of Ruth's old sweaters against the cold, and the sight of it about undid me. Adam found a quiet steadiness in having his wife under the same roof, his hand always drifting to the curve of her belly. Little Eli had a mother in the house again, and he laughed more. For a few mornings, with the wood stove ticking and the smell of coffee and the wheat fields white with frost outside the window, a man could almost forget there was a wolf out there sharpening his teeth. I let myself feel those mornings. I watched my whole family gathered under one frost-rimmed roof, my son's hand resting where my grandchild was growing, the boy laughing. And I thanked God quiet for it. A man ought to let himself feel the good days while he has them. I have learned how few of them a person gets. But peace you have not paid for is only peace you are borrowing. And the bill came in a cream-colored envelope. It arrived on a Thursday, hand-delivered by a courier in a clean car that looked badly out of place in our gravel drive. The envelope was heavy, the paper thick as a shingle, the writing on it gold. Grace's name was on the front in a fine looping script. She opened it at the kitchen table while we all stood around like it might go off. Inside was an invitation to a charity gala at the Ashby estate, 3 weeks hence. A grand affair for the Children's Hospital, the card said, with Mr. Roland Ashby as the honored host. And below the printed words, in that same gold ink, a few lines in her father's own hand. He wrote that life was short, that family was family, that he hoped they might all come, set aside their differences, and begin again. I watched the hope rise up in Grace's face, and it grieved me, because I have seen that particular hope before. It is the hope of a child who keeps reaching for the same stove that has burned her every time she has ever touched it. "Maybe he means it," she said softly, reading it again. "Maybe watching me leave shook something loose in him. He is still my father." Adam laid his hand over hers. "Grace," he said, as gentle as he could, "look at what that card is. It is engraved, printed on paper that costs more than my old car. He had it made weeks ago. A man does not have his change of heart printed up by the hundred and mailed out across the county. This is not a father reaching for his daughter. This is a stage, and he is inviting us up onto it so the whole world can watch him be merciful to the trash he took in." Grace's eyes filled, because she knew her husband was right. And knowing it hurt worse than the hoping had. I had been quiet through all of this, standing by the stove. Now I spoke. "We are going to go," I said. They both turned and looked at me as though I had lost my mind. "Dad, you cannot be serious," Adam said. "You just heard me. It is a trap. He wants to parade us in front of his rich friends and shame us. Why on earth would we walk straight into it?" "Because, son," I said, "a trap only catches the man who does not know it is there." I pulled out a chair and sat down across from them, and the old patience settled over me like a coat I had worn 1,000 times. "Your father thinks he is inviting a beaten old farmer to come and kneel," I said to Grace. "He is going to look at me across that fancy room and see a nobody. Help. Furniture. A man not worth a second glance. And that child is about the most useful thing in this whole world a man can be." "I do not understand," Grace whispered. "The safest place to hide a knife," I said, "is in the hand of a man nobody bothers to look at. Roland Ashby has spent his whole life not looking at people like me. He looks straight through us, the way he looked through your husband, the way he has looked through every soul who ever poured his coffee or mowed his lawn. So I am going to walk into that man's house. I am going to let him see the exact nothing he expects to see. And while he is busy being the great Roland Ashby for all his important friends, this nobody is going to be standing close enough to hear every word, read every face, and learn the last thing or two I still need to know." Adam was staring at me now, and something was dawning in his eyes. Something caught between fear and a wild, rising hope. "Dad," he said slowly, "who are you?" I just smiled and picked up the invitation and ran my thumb across the gold letters of Roland Ashby's name. I did not answer him. I had kept my own counsel so long that the keeping had become a wall, even between me and my own boy. I told myself it was to protect him. Maybe it was. Maybe it had only ever been habit. The good book says pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Roland Ashby had just put his pride down on paper, in gold ink, and mailed it to my kitchen table. He believed he was opening his grand house to a broken old man he could set on his knees for the amusement of his guests. He did not know he had just held the door for the one man in the state who already owned the ground that house was standing on. I have lived long enough to learn that the more a thing sparkles, the harder it is working to hide what lies underneath. The Ashby estate that night was lit up like heaven's own front parlor. There were chandeliers dripping crystal, waiters in white gloves, a string quartet sawing away in a corner, and more silk and diamonds in that one ballroom than in the whole of Cedar Hollow put together. 200 of the finest people in the state had come to give their money to the Children's Hospital, and to be seen giving it, which for most of them was the larger part of the gift. I came in my Sunday suit, which is to say, a brown jacket 20 years out of fashion. And the moment I stepped through those doors, I watched the eyes slide right off me. To a room like that, I was a draft from an open window, nothing worth turning a head for. And that, just as I had told Grace, was exactly where I wanted to be. Adam and Grace had gone ahead to find their table. I was standing near the wall, taking the measure of the room, when Roland Ashby spotted me from across the floor. I will give the man this. He never once wasted a humiliation when one was handed to him. He came gliding over with two of his rich friends in tow. A smile spread wide across his face. His voice pitched loud enough to turn heads. "Well, would you look at this," he said. "The Calloway patriarch himself. Tell me, old-timer, did you lose your way to the kitchen? The help entrance is around back." A few people tittered. He plucked a glass of red wine off a passing tray and held it out to me. "Here, make yourself useful while you're standing there." The room had begun to watch. I looked at the glass, and I looked at his face, and I made my choice. I took it. "There is a good fellow," Ashby said. And then, watching my eyes the whole time, he tipped his own glass over, slow and deliberate, and let the red wine spill in a long splash across the marble at my feet. "Oh, dear," he said, to a ripple of laughter. "Clumsy of me. Well, go on. You are the help tonight. Clean it up." I felt every eye in that glittering place fix on the old man in the brown suit. And I will not pretend to you that it cost me nothing. There is a kind of shame that reaches all the way down to the boy you once were. But I have buried a wife and a father, and I have learned that a man's knees bending is not the same as a man breaking. So I lowered myself down, slow, my old joints complaining, took out my handkerchief and began to wipe up Roland Ashby's wine, while 200 of the richest people in the state looked on. And here's a thing those laughing people did not understand. A man down on his knees has a particular view of a room. From there I could see whose fine shoes were worn through underneath, which proud families were closer to ruin than they would ever admit, who laughed too hard to curry favor and who looked away ashamed. A man wiping your floor hears everything, because you have decided he is furniture. I was not being humiliated. I was taking inventory. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded bill, and let it flutter down onto the wet marble beside my hand. "For your trouble," he said. Then he leaned down close, so only the nearest few could hear, and said the thing he had been saving. "You know, your wife would have been good at this. Ruth, was it? A woman who spent her whole life carrying trays and wiping up after her betters. The apple does not fall far, does it? Pity she is not here to see how well her family turned out." Something in me went white and silent. He had found the one wound on me that has never healed, and he had pressed his thumb into it on purpose. For sport. I heard the chair scrape before I saw him. Adam came across that ballroom like a thunderclap, his face white, his eyes nothing but fire, and the people parted before him in alarm. He had heard. Of course he had heard. And every promise he had made to be patient, every word I had ever said to him about handing this man his walls, all of it burned clean away in the space of a single heartbeat. His fist was already drawing back. Still down on one knee, I reached up and caught my son's wrist in midair, hard, and held it. His clenched fist trembling, not 6 inches from Roland Ashby's smiling face. "No," I said, low. Only for him. And in that frozen moment, with the whole gilded room holding its breath. I happened to glance past Ashby's shoulder to a man standing a little apart from the crowd. A lean, hard-faced fellow in a gray suit who had not laughed once all evening. Russell Kane, the fixer. And he was not looking at me on my knees, nor at the fist in the air. He was looking at his own employer, at Roland Ashby's delighted, cruel face. And just for a second, before he caught himself and smoothed it away, something crossed Kane's features that did not belong on the face of a loyal man. It looked a great deal like disgust. I tucked that away with everything else I had gathered that night. And I held my son's arm. And I thought of an old verse Ruth loved. "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." Roland Ashby did not know it yet, smiling down at me on his beautiful floor. But I already held the deed to the very ground we were both standing on. "Not here, son," I said. "Not like this." I held Adam's wrist a moment longer, until I felt the fight go out of it. And then I let it down. The whole ballroom was frozen, 200 faces caught between scandal and delight. And Roland Ashby stood in the middle of it, with that smile still hanging on his face, like a man who had won. I got up off my knee, slow, and brushed off my trousers. Then I bent and picked up the folded bill he had thrown at me, off the wet marble. The room expected me to pocket it, the way a beaten man pockets his scraps. Instead, I stepped in close to Roland Ashby, closer than his guards liked, and I tucked that bill gently into the breast pocket of his fine tuxedo and patted it flat. "You keep that," I said, quiet, just for him. "Where you are headed, friend, you are going to need it more than I will." Something flickered behind his eyes. He did not know what I meant. But for the first time all night, he was not certain. Then I took my son by one arm and my daughter-in-law by the other, and we walked out of that glittering room with our backs straight, and let them whisper. We stepped out into the cold night air, and I took the first full breath I had drawn in an hour. Behind us the music struck up again, and the rich folks went back to their wine, already turning the evening into a story they would tell. Let them. I had what I came for. Nobody spoke until we were back on the dark county road, the lights of that great house shrinking in the mirror behind us. Adam was still shaking with the leftover rage. Grace was crying soft, the way a person cries when they have finally let go of a hope they should have set down long ago. "Dad," Adam said at last, his voice raw. "I am sorry. I almost ruined everything. I could not just sit there and let him do that to you. Let him say that about Mom." "I know it, son," I said. "There is no shame in a man wanting to defend his mother." The shame tonight was all his. Grace had gone quiet, and I knew what she was carrying. It is one thing to be wronged by a stranger. It is another to watch your own father stand before the whole world and show everyone exactly how small his heart had always been. She was not only weeping over tonight, she was burying a father who, it turned out, had died a long time ago. I drove a while in the quiet. Then I reached up and unclipped a small black thing, no bigger than a shirt button, from my lapel, and held it up where they could see it in the dashboard light. "You see this? This little thing has been running since the moment I walked through his front door. Every word that man said to me tonight. The wine, the money, what he said about your mother, all of it, cleaned as a church bell." Grace turned in her seat and stared at it. "That is why I needed him to do it in front of his own people," I said. "A cruel man, in private, can always claim it never happened. But a cruel man who cannot resist an audience hands you the rope himself." I had carried that recorder in the way another man carries an umbrella into a sky already full of clouds. I knew the kind of man Roland Ashby was. I knew pride like his cannot help but perform. All I had to do was show up looking like nothing at all, and give it room. Adam was looking at me now the way a man looks at a stranger wearing his father's face. "Dad, what is going on? Who are you?" So I told them one piece of it. Not all of it. Not the oldest part. Not yet. But one piece. While Roland Ashby was making me wipe his floor tonight, feeling like the biggest man in the state, some lawyers in 3 different cities were finishing a job I set them on weeks ago. As of about an hour ago, every dollar that man owes in this world, every note on that resort, every loan against Ashby Ridge, all of it belongs to me now. He just does not know it yet. The truck went dead silent. Grace had a hand over her mouth. Adam looked like the floor had dropped clean out of the world. "You own his debt," he whispered. "I own his debt," I said. "And I own the ground his big house is sitting on. I have for years. He spent tonight making an old man kneel, and he never once stopped to wonder why that old man was smiling." I watched it work through them in the dark, the slow turning of despair into something with a little light in it. Grace made a sound that was half a sob and half a laugh, and she reached up and squeezed my shoulder. And she had no words, and she did not need any. For the first time since the night I found them on that curb in the rain, my son believed we might win. I did not tell him how long the road still ran, nor what it would yet cost us before the end. That night, I let him keep the hope. He had earned it. The good book does not stutter on this point. "Be not deceived," it says. "God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." Roland Ashby had spent a lifetime sowing cruelty into the ground, into my family, into that stolen valley, laughing while he did it. He believed he had spent that evening collecting one more easy victory. The truth is, he had just hauled in the first sheaf of a poison harvest, one he had been planting his whole life. And come the reaping, it would cost him every last thing he had. A drowning man does not stop to ask many questions about the hand that reaches out to him. He simply grabs hold. That is a thing I have known about people my whole life, and I built my entire plan around it. By the time the snow lay deep on the wheat fields, Roland Ashby was a drowning man. He did not know it yet, not fully, but the water was already up around his chest. You see, a man who owes money owes it to somebody. And all those notes Ashby had taken on to build his grand resort down south and his gated houses on my father's stolen valley, every bit of it now ran back to a quiet company called Granary Holdings. To me. So when his payments came due that winter, there was no friendly banker left to grant him another month. There was only a cold letter, and another, and a date circled in red. His grand projects began to stall. Crews went unpaid. Word started getting around, the way it does, that the great Roland Ashby was stretched thin. A subcontractor he had stiffed put a lien on the resort. A city bank quietly declined to renew a line of credit it had carried for him 15 years. Little things. But little things have a way of piling into an avalanche, given a cold enough winter. He started making calls, hunting money. Every reputable bank in the region had heard the whispers and shut its doors. He was a proud man standing in rising water, and he was beginning, just beginning, to be afraid. And that is when I sent him his lifeline. I had David Sinclair set up a new company, clean and far away, with an office in a glass tower in another state, and a name that sounded like money. Meridian Capital Partners. As far as Roland Ashby could ever learn, Meridian was a group of out-of-town investors who had heard about his troubles and smelled an opportunity. Sophisticated men, discreet men, men who knew nothing of a feud in a little Kansas town and cared even less. They came to him with an offer that must have felt like the hand of Providence. $12 million. Enough to steady every wobbling project. Enough to finish Ashby Ridge and silence every last whisper. A rescue. There was only one small condition, buried deep in the paperwork. The way you bury a seed in the fall and forget you put it in the ground. The loan was to be secured by a personal guarantee. Not just the projects, not just the company. Everything. His mansion, his accounts, his good name. Roland Ashby's whole gleaming kingdom pledged as collateral, should he ever default. Now, I will say this for the man. He was no fool. And for one moment, he very nearly saw it. Sinclair told me later there was a meeting where Ashby's own fixer, Russell Kane, sat at the end of the table, reading the Meridian documents with a frown that would not leave his face. Kane could not find a single thing wrong. The papers were clean. The firm checked out. The money was real. And yet, something about the whole arrangement sat poorly with him. The way a sound you cannot place will keep a man awake at night. He told Ashby, more than once, that it felt too easy. That a man does not get handed $12 million by strangers without a hook in it somewhere. Sinclair said Kane even drove out to that glass tower himself, walked the floor, shook the hands, and still could not put his finger on it. Some men have a nose for a trap they cannot explain. But Kane worked for a man who did not pay him to be right, only to do as he was told. But Roland Ashby had spent his whole life being the smartest man in every room. And pride like that does not believe it can be outplayed. Least of all by some out-of-state money men. And certainly not by an old farmer he had made kneel on his floor and forgotten before the wine was dry. They need this deal more than I do. Russell, he said, and waved his fixer's worry away like smoke. And he signed. He signed every page, pledged every brick and dollar to his name, and shook the hand of the man who had come to bury him. The money flowed in. And here was the part that took the most patience out of me, because every fiber I had wanted the reckoning right then. Instead, I let him have his rescue. I let him pour that $12 million straight into the ground. I watched him hire back his crews, pour more concrete, raise Ashby Ridge higher against the winter sky, prouder than ever, building his monument on my family's stolen valley, with money that was a noose dressed up as a gift. I will be honest with you, as I have tried to be all through this. There were nights that winter I lay awake and did not much like the man I was becoming. I was enjoying it. God forgive me. I was enjoying the slow tightening of the rope, and a part of me could not say for certain whether what I was building was justice, or only my own revenge wearing justice for a Sunday coat. Then I would think of Grace, her belly round and full now, safe under my roof, and the child coming in the spring. And I would think of my father, and I would rise the next morning and tighten the rope a little more. The good book tells of a foolish man who built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that house. And it fell, and great was the fall of it. Roland Ashby was building his house higher than he had ever dared before. He had no notion what it was standing on, nor whose hand held the one beam keeping it all from coming down. And the higher a man builds on a rotten foundation, the louder it is bound to fall. For 3 weeks, Roland Ashby believed he had won. He had his 12 million. He had his cruise back. Ashby Ridge was climbing toward the sky again. The whispers about him had quieted, and he was once more the biggest man in the county, untouchable on his hill. Then, one gray afternoon late in February, his investigators brought him a folder. I would have given a good deal to see his face when he opened it. A clever man, the kind who hires the best, gets the truth handed to him in the end, whether he wants it or not. The folder traced the money. It followed Meridian Capital Partners back through one shell and then another, to a holding company in another state, and from there to a quiet little outfit nobody had ever heard of, run out of the back of a barn in Cedar Hollow. Granary Holdings. Henry Calloway, the white knight who had saved him, and the unseen hand that had been strangling him for months, were one and the same man. And that man was the old farmer he had made kneel on his marble floor and never thought of again. He came that same evening. I heard the engine of his big black car tearing up my gravel lane long before the headlights swung across the kitchen window. And I told Adam and Grace to take Eli upstairs and stay there. Then I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down at my own kitchen table, and waited. He did not knock. He threw the door open so hard it banged against the wall. And Roland Ashby stood there in my doorway, all that polish gone, his face white and twisted. "You," he said. "Evening, Roland," I said. "Coffee, you think you are clever." He stalked into my kitchen, jabbing a finger at the air. "Meridian, the debt, all of it. This is fraud, old man. You concealed your identity to induce me into a contract. I will have a dozen lawyers on you by morning. I will tie you up in court until you die in that chair." I took a slow sip of my coffee and looked at him over the rim of the cup. "You can try," I said, "but you signed every one of those papers with your own hand, Roland, of your own free will, while your man Kane sat right there begging you not to. There was no fraud. There was a deal, a hard one, the kind of deal men like you have been handing men like me for 100 years. I expect it stings some, being on the other side of it." He stared at me, and I watched the truth of it land on him in pieces. I was not the help. I had never once been the help. "Who are you?" he said, and for the first time it was not a sneer. It was nearly a whisper. "I am Henry Calloway," I said, "two-time mayor of this town, whose name you never bothered to learn. And I own your debt. I own the ground your big house is sitting on. And come the day I choose, I can call that $12 million note due and watch your whole gleaming kingdom drop into my hand like an apple off a tree." I watched him do the arithmetic, quick as ever, and I watched him change. The fury drained out of his face, and something smoother slid over it. The old charm, the salesman, reaching for a deal the way a drowning man reaches for anything that floats. "All right," he said, and managed to smile. "All right. I underestimated you, Henry. I can admit that. But look, we are both businessmen. There is no reason this has to be a war. You hold my paper, fine. So let us be partners. There is more money in Ashby Ridge than you ever dreamed of, and I would sooner split it with a sharp old fox like you than fight you. Think of Grace. Think of the baby. We could be family. We could all of us walk away rich." And there it was. The one moment in all of this where Roland Ashby could have turned down a different road. If he had said he was sorry and meant it, even a little. If he had offered to give that valley back, if there had been one true thing under all that oil. But I looked into his eyes, and there was nothing there but a man hunting for the angle. He did not want to be family. He wanted his boot back on my neck, and he was willing to call it love to get it. "No, Roland," I said quietly. "I do not believe we will be partners." And just like that, the smile died, and the last of the mask slid away. And I finally saw the thing that had been living under all that silk the whole time. "Then you have made a serious mistake," he said, his voice gone low and flat and cold as a grave. "You think you have won. You have a note on paper. I have lawyers and judges and friends in every office in this state. I will bury you, old man. I will bury you, and that disgraced son of yours, and the girl. And I will see to it that child is born with nothing and no one. You should have stayed on your knees." He turned and walked out, and the black car tore back down my lane into the dark. The good book says, "Be sure your sin will find you out." Roland Ashby's had just driven all the way out to my kitchen and looked him square in the eye, and he still could not see it. He drove off into that February night, believing the war had only begun. He had no idea it was already over, and that he had lost it months ago, in the dark, without ever once hearing the shot. It was 3 nights after Roland Ashby stood in my kitchen and swore to bury us all, that Grace came to find me on the porch. I was sitting out there in the cold with a blanket over my knees, watching the stars come out hard and bright over the frozen fields, turning the whole tangled business over in my mind. I heard the screen door creak, and there she was, one hand resting on the swell of her belly, the other holding a large brown envelope worn soft at the corners, like it had been handled 1,000 times. "Mr. Calloway," she said. Her voice was shaking. "There is something I have to tell you, something I should have told you a long while ago. And after I do, you may not want me under your roof anymore." I told her to sit down, and I waited. "I have known what my father is since I was a girl," she said, looking out at the dark instead of at me. "I grew up in that house, watching men walk in proud and leave ruined. And when I was 18, he gave me a job in his company. He thought he was being a good father, keeping his little girl close. He put me in records, the archives, all the old files, the deeds, the contracts, going back 30 years. He never once imagined I would read them." She set the envelope on the little table between us with both hands, as if it weighed more than it did. "For 16 years, I have been quietly making copies. Every time I found something he had buried, I took it. Land he seized by threat. Men he broke with lies. I told myself that someday it would matter. But you do not know what it is to love your father and fear him in the same breath. To smile at his table, knowing what sat in the files downstairs. Every year I told myself I would find the courage. Every year I failed. Until a kind man gave me something worth being brave for." Her tears were running freely now. "And the worst one, the one that has haunted me the longest, was a piece of land he stole 30 years ago. He forged the deed. He paid a county clerk named Hollis to file the false papers and burn the originals. Only Hollis did not burn them. He kept them, scared. And years later, when he was dying, he gave them to me. He said I was the only one in that family with a conscience." She finally turned and looked at me. "It was a valley, Mr. Calloway. The finest bottomland in the county. My father built Ashby Ridge on it. And the man he ruined to take it? She could not finish. So I finished it for her, in a voice I did not quite know as my own. His name was Jacob Calloway, I said. He was my father. The night went very still around us. She nodded, and the sob broke out of her. I did not know, she wept. I swear before God I did not know. Not when I met Adam, not when I married him. I fell in love with a kind man named Adam Calloway, and only later, putting the pieces together, did I understand. The family my father destroyed. The grandson I married. I have been so afraid to tell you. I thought you would believe I married him as some kind of scheme. I did not. I married him because he was good. But I think God put me in that house, and put those papers in my hands, and walked me all the way to your door. For this. And she pushed the worn envelope across the table to me. To the family it had been stolen from. I sat there in the cold and could not speak. For 30 years I had carried the guilt of my father's stolen valley like a stone lodged in my chest. I had built a whole empire in the dark to win it back. And now the proof I needed, the one thing that could undo all of it, was being placed in my hands by the thief's own daughter, the mother of my grandchild, a woman braver than any soldier I ever served beside. 30 years I had told myself the burden was mine alone to carry, in the dark, where I carried everything else. And here was the answer, all along, living under my own roof, calling my son her husband. I had been so busy keeping my own counsel that I had nearly missed the hand of God moving in plain sight at my own table. There is a verse my Ruth marked in her Bible, from the very end of Genesis. Ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good. I had read it 100 times and never once felt the floor of it open up beneath me the way it did on that porch. Grace, I started. Child, you have no idea what you have just... But that was when we heard it. From the open window above us, from the room where little Eli slept, a sound that froze the blood in my old veins. A thin, scraping, desperate wheeze, then a cough that would not stop. And then Adam's voice, sharp with terror, calling down the stairs. Dad! Dad, come quick! He can't breathe! Eli can't breathe! Grace was up and through that door before I had risen, crying her son's name. I came up those stairs faster than these old legs have moved in 20 years. And when I reached that little room, I saw my grandson sitting up in his bed, his lips gone a terrible blue, his small chest heaving, fighting for air that would not come. I have seen a great deal of fear in my time. I had never once been as afraid as I was standing in that doorway. There was no time left for envelopes. No time for stolen valleys or 30-year wars. Get the boy in the car, I said. Right now, I will remember the numbers on that emergency room clock until the day I die. 12:41 in the morning. That was the moment a tired young doctor came through the doors and told us my grandson's heart and lungs were failing. That it was a thing she did not know how to mend, and that the one person in 3 counties who could was a specialist named Dr. Patricia Reyes, and that Dr. Reyes, she was sorry to say, had declined to come in. We had carried Eli into that hospital an hour before, his lips blue, his little body limp as a wet rag. Adam, a surgeon himself, had done everything he knew how to do in the back of my truck, breathing for his own boy, and it had not been enough. There is no crueler thing on this earth, I think, than to put healing into a man's hands, strip away his right to use it, and then lay his own dying child down in front of him. Ashby had taken Adam's license months ago. Now Adam knelt helpless over the one patient in all the world he would have traded his own life to save. Now we stood in a cold hallway under buzzing lights. Grace folded over a plastic chair, sobbing. Adam, gray as ash, and a doctor telling us the only soul who could save Eli would not come. "I do not understand," Adam said. "Reyes is on staff here. This is a child dying. Why would she refuse?" The young doctor would not meet his eyes. "I was told," she said carefully, "that Dr. Reyes was advised the case falls outside her area. That is all I know. I am sorry." But I knew. God help me. I knew the instant I heard it. It went through me cold as creek water in March. This was not medicine. This was Roland Ashby. He had stood in my own kitchen and promised he would bury us all, that he would see to it that baby was born with nothing and no one. And here he was, making good on it, reaching his soft, manicured hand all the way into a hospital in the dead of night to pull the one doctor who could keep a small boy breathing. To kill a child. To spite an old man. There is a verse in the book of Matthew, and it is the most terrible verse in all of Scripture. It says that whoever harms one of these little ones, it would be better for that man that a millstone were hanged about his neck, and that he were drowned in the depth of the sea. Standing in that hallway, I understood that verse for the first time in my life. I have never, in all my years, wanted to do violence to a man the way I wanted to in that moment. And right behind the fury came the thing that has never fully let go of me since. Because I had done this. Not Ashby alone. Me. I had spent months in the dark, so proud of my patience, so sure of my quiet little war, moving my pieces and keeping my secrets, and the whole time I had left this family sitting out in the open as bait. I had poked the snake and gone on smiling, and now the snake had struck the smallest and most innocent one of us all. All my hidden power, all my deeds and my ledgers, and not 1 cent of it could put a single breath of air into that little boy's chest. But there was one thing it could do. I walked away from my weeping family to a quiet corner of that hallway, took out my phone, and made a call. Not to Sinclair this time, to a man who sat on the board of that very hospital. A man who happened to know precisely what Granary Holdings was. "This is Henry Calloway," I said when he answered, sleep thick in his voice. "I will say this once. Granary holds the paper on better than 3/4 of your hospital. The building you are lying in bed inside of tonight. The wing with your name on it. All of it. Within the hour, my grandson is going to have Dr. Patricia Reyes standing at his bedside. Or first thing in the morning, I am going to call every note your hospital owes me. All at once. With a newspaper man standing beside me, while I explain to this whole state exactly why. Do you understand me?" There was a long silence on the line. Then a single word. Yes. Dr. Reyes was scrubbing in within the hour. I will not tell you all of what that good woman did in the small hours of that night, because I do not have the words for it. I will only tell you that a little before dawn, she came out into that hallway, worn to the bone, and she smiled. And she told us the boy was breathing on his own, and that he was going to be all right. Grace fell into Adam's arms, and I walked outside into the freezing dark and leaned against the cold brick of that hospital wall. And for the first time since the day I buried Ruth, this hard old man wept like a child. Then I dried my face, and I made a decision out there in the dark, one I should have made a long time before. No more shadows. No more quiet war. No more keeping my own counsel while the people I love sat in the line of fire. Roland Ashby liked to do his evil in the dark, where no one could see it done. So I was going to haul every last bit of it out into the daylight, in front of God and the whole world, and let them all watch. The roots I had left buried in the ground for 30 years were about to come up into the light. Every last one of them. One at a time. The evening we brought Eli home from the hospital, after Grace had fallen asleep with the boy safe in her arms, I told my son to sit down at the kitchen table. "There is a thing I have to tell you," I said. "All of it. This time. I have kept it from you your whole life, and I told myself it was to protect you. But the keeping of it is what nearly cost us that little boy upstairs. So I am done keeping it." Adam sat. The lamp threw a small circle of light over the table, and out the window the wheat fields lay silver under the moon. And I told my son the truth. "You know your grandfather, my father, Jacob Calloway, as a name on a stone in the churchyard," I said. "What you do not know is how he came to be there. 30 years ago, our family owned the finest piece of bottomland in this county, a green valley with a creek running through it, ground your great-great-grandfather cleared with his own hands. It was everything we had, and Roland Ashby wanted it." I turned my coffee cup slow in my hands. He could not buy it, because my father would not sell. So he took it. He had a county clerk forge my father's name on a deed of sale, paid another to swear he witnessed it, and just like that, on paper, the valley was his. My father fought it in court 2 years, but Ashby had the money and the lawyers and the judges, and a poor farmer had nothing but the truth. The truth lost. It broke something in my father that never did mend. He was gone within the year. The doctors called it his heart. I have always called it grief. Adam started to speak, but I raised my hand. The hardest part was still coming, and I had to get it out before my courage failed. "Now here is the thing I have never told a living soul," I said, and my voice was not steady. "When all of this happened, I was a young man. I had just won my 2nd term as mayor. I was going places. Everyone said so. And when my father came to me, broken, begging me to use what little standing I had to help him fight, to stand up and call that man the thief he was, I had to stop. 30 years, and the words still cut my throat coming up. I told him no. I told my own father no. I was afraid. Ashby was already powerful, and I knew that if I fought him out in the open, he would burn my future to the ground. So I told my father to let it go. I told him there would be a better, smarter time to fight it. I chose my career over him, and he looked at me, and something went out of his eyes, and he never asked me for another thing as long as he lived. He died a few months later, believing his only son would not stand up for him. The kitchen was dead silent. I made myself look my son in the face. The good book says the Lord will not despise a broken and a contrite heart. I have prayed on that verse for 30 years, because there has not been one day in all that time I have not carried the shame of it. Everything I built, every dollar of granary, I built in the dark to be ready to finish the fight I was too much of a coward to fight when it might have saved my father's life. This was never only about justice, son. It was about a debt I owed a dead man. Adam's eyes were wet. "Dad," he said, "why? Why did he hate us so much? It was 30 years ago. Why come after me, after Grace, After Eli, all this time later. And here I had to tell him the last thing. The thing underneath all the other things. Because it was never truly about the land, I said. The land was only how it came out of him. Before your mother ever laid eyes on me, when she was a young woman, the prettiest girl in 3 counties, Ashby courted her. He was rich even then, and he was certain she would have him. He asked her to be his wife. I looked out at the moonlit fields, and could very near see her standing there, and she said no. She turned down his money and his big house and his name, and married a young man with dirt under his nails, who loved her more than his next breath. She chose me, and a man like Ashby, whose whole soul is built on getting the thing he wants, never once forgave it. He could not have her, so he set about ruining everything that was hers. Her husband's family, her husband's father, our land. And when she was gone, and we had a son, and that son had a son of his own, he came after them too. Every cruel thing that man has done to this family traces back to a woman who told him no 40 years ago. It was never about you, Adam. Not your license, not your marriage. You were only the newest way left to him to wound a dead woman who never wanted him. Adam put his face in his hands, and I watched his whole life rearrange itself behind his eyes. Understood at last from the inside out. I reached across the table and took up the worn brown envelope Grace had given me. The true deed, the forged one, the dead clerk's confession, and set it in the center of the lamplight between us. He signed his name to a lie 30 years ago, I said. And that signature is the one thing in this world he can never take back. Tomorrow, I begin to make him answer for the whole of it. Not in the dark this time, in the daylight, where the world can watch. I had been a patient man for 30 years. The waiting was over. The city wore its glass towers like a suit of shining armor, and Roland Ashby's office sat at the very top of the tallest one, 40 floors above the street, behind a desk the size of a rowboat. I rode the elevator up alone. Sinclair had arranged the meeting, and Ashby believed I was coming to talk terms on the $12 million in debt that Granary now held over his head. He believed, I think, that he was about to buy his way back to even. He had no notion I was bringing him the bill for 30 years. "Henry," he said, rising with that oily smile, spreading his hands like we were old friends. "I knew we were reasonable men. Sit. Let us find a number that makes this whole unpleasantness disappear." "I am not here to find a number, Roland," I said. And I set my old leather satchel on his great desk and began to lay things out on the polished wood, one at a time, the way a man lays down cards. "This," I said, "is a deed. The true deed to a valley in Cedar Hollow, signed by my great-grandfather, held by my family for 4 generations. I laid down the next page. "This is the deed of sale you filed 30 years ago, the one with the forged signature. The handwriting does not match the other, and 3 experts will swear to that in court." Another page. "These are bank records. They show a payment from a company you controlled to a county clerk named Hollis 2 weeks before that forged deed ever appeared. Mr. Hollis kept his own copies before he passed. He gave them to someone, and that someone gave them to me." Ashby's smile was beginning to curl at the edges. I laid down a thicker document. "And this is a sworn statement from Gerald Voss. You recall Mr. Voss, The man on the medical board you leaned on to file a false complaint against my son? It turns out Mr. Voss was drowning in debt, the way you like all your men to be. But it also turns out a drowning man will grab any rope you throw him. My attorney threw him one. He broke like dry kindling. Roland, he has named you in writing. He has named the man who forged the complaint for you. He has named all of it. Ashby sat down slowly in his great chair. The color was leaving his face. Why, he said, very quietly. Why would a man spend years and a fortune on this, on me? Who are you? And here was the part I had carried for 30 years. You truly do not know, do you? I said. You broke a man named Jacob Calloway 30 years ago, took his land, took his good name in a courtroom, took the heart right out of his chest. He died of it. I leaned down on his desk. Jacob Calloway was my father, Roland. I am his son. I have been his son this whole time. Sitting right under your nose in that little town, pouring beer and growing wheat, while I quietly bought up every debt you ever made. You have spent this last year being buried, slow, by a dead man's boy. And you never once troubled yourself to look at my face. I watched it land on him. I watched 30 years rearrange themselves behind his eyes the way they had behind my son's. The brewer he had mocked, the woman he could not have, the father he had destroyed. All of it one bloodline come back around on him. There was one card left, and it was the one that finished him. There is a digital file, I said. Every record I just laid here, scanned and copied and locked away in 3 places. You ordered that file destroyed some weeks ago, did you not? When you first felt the floor shifting under you. You told one of your own men to burn it down to nothing. I tapped the satchel. He did not. I do not know why. Maybe he found a scrap of his conscience buried in there somewhere. Maybe he was only tired. All I know is that the files you were promised were ashes came to me whole instead. The man who spared them is no hero. Roland. He had his hand in your dirt for years. And the law will want its answer from him, too. But when it counted, in the dark where not one soul was looking, he did one right thing, which is one more than you have managed in your whole life. Ashby understood then who had betrayed him. I saw it cross his face like a shadow moving over a field, and I felt no joy in it, none at all. Only a tired sort of sorrow for every soul that man had ever pulled down into the mud alongside him. Henry, his voice cracked clean down the middle. Please, whatever you want, name it. The land, money, all of it, anything. We can keep this between the two of us. No, Roland, I said, and I gathered my papers back into the satchel. That is the one thing we cannot do. You did your evil in the dark for 40 years, because the dark was the only place you were ever safe. There is an old line in Ecclesiastes that says, God shall bring every work into judgment, with every secret thing. Well, your secret things are going into the light now, in front of a judge and 12 plain citizens, and the whole wide world. This ends in a courtroom, not in this office, and not with a check. I walked to the door, and I stopped, and I did not turn around. It is out of my hands now, I said. All of it. The lawyers and the court and the law will decide whether this costs you everything or only almost everything. That part is no longer mine to decide. I learned a thing about myself in the weeks that followed, and it is not a thing I am proud of. I learned that once you have a man by the throat, destroying him is the easiest thing in all the world. David Sinclair sat across from me at my kitchen table, the same table where I had confessed everything to my son. And he laid the two roads out before me, plain. You do not have to do this in a courtroom. Henry, he said, you understand that. You hold the note on the man's entire life. $12 million. Personally guaranteed against every brick and acre he owns. Say the word, and tomorrow morning I call all of it due, all at once. He cannot pay. The bank takes the tower. The bank takes the house. Ashby Ridge folds. By month's end, Roland Ashby is a 68-year-old man with no money, no name, and no roof, living out of whatever car they have not yet hauled off. You can do that, quietly, cleanly, and no judge ever needs to hear a word of it. I will not lie to you and tell you I did not want it. God forgive me. I wanted it more than I have wanted anything in my life. I sat there and let myself see it, every inch of it. I saw Roland Ashby ruined the same slow way he had ruined my father. I saw him standing out in the cold with nothing in his hands, the way he had left my son and my grandson standing in the rain. There is a kind of justice in an eye for an eye that tastes sweeter than honey, and I held that sweetness on my tongue a good while, there in that quiet kitchen. And then I thought about Eli. I thought about that little boy upstairs, breathing easy now, and about the sort of man I wanted him to know his grandfather to be. I thought about how a farmer who poisons his enemy's field to spite him will, soon enough, find the poison has crept under the fence and into his own ground, and into the bread on his own table, and into the blood of his own children. You cannot sow that kind of seed and keep the harvest clean. It does not work that way. It never has. When all of this began, I told you I had wrestled with a verse out of the book of Romans. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will repay. I had wrestled with it for 30 years, if I am honest, wanting to believe it while I built an empire to take that vengeance into my own two hands. But sitting there, with the power to crush a man entirely, and not one soul to stop me, I finally understood what that verse had been trying to tell me the whole time. It was not promising me the wicked go unpunished. It was telling me the punishing was never meant to be mine to carry. No, David, I said. We do this right. We do this in the daylight, in front of the law, where it cannot poison what comes after. Give it all to the prosecutor, every last page. And so we did. I will not walk you through the long machinery of the law, for it grinds slow and makes for poor story. I will only tell you how it came out. Roland Ashby was indicted on more counts than I could keep straight. Fraud and forgery and conspiracy stretching back 3 decades. The valley, my father's Green Valley, was ordered returned to the Callaway name. And Ashby Ridge, the thing they meant to build on top of our stolen ground, was halted with the bulldozers still sitting cold in the mud. The false complaint against my son was struck down, and inside a month, Adam had his medical license back in his hand. There was a man in our little hospital chapel who wept the day he was told he could heal again. And Russell Kane, the man who had spared the evidence in the dark. The law took its pound from him, too, for the part he had played in the forging of it. And there was nothing I could do to stop that. Nor was there anything I should have done. But I made certain the prosecutor knew, in writing, what that man had done at the end, when it counted for something. It was not enough to save him. It was, I hoped, enough to be remembered by. The evening the valley came back to us. Grace sat down on my porch steps and cried in a way I have never in my life seen a person cry. 16 years of silence and fear and secret-keeping all pouring out of her at once. I sat down beside her and put my old arm around her shoulders. She was Roland Ashby's daughter by blood. But blood does not make a family. Love does. And that girl had earned her place in mine 10 times over. That night, when the house had finally gone quiet and every soul in it was asleep, I did not feel the way I had spent 30 years imagining I would feel. There was no triumph anywhere in me. There was only a great stillness. The stillness of a field the day after the last of the harvest is in, when the work of a whole long year is done at last. I went out and sat alone on my porch in the dark. And from my coat pocket, I took out the one thing I had been carrying, unopened, for 3 years. A letter, sealed, written in my wife's own hand. Ruth had set it down in her final weeks, and she had made me promise her I would not break the seal until the day my long fight with Roland Ashby was finished. One way or the other. The fight was finished now. I held my wife's last words there in my hand. And I did not yet know that they were about to change everything I believed about why I had done all of this. I broke the seal on that letter with hands that were not steady, there in the dark on my porch. And my wife began to speak to me again for the first time in 3 years. She wrote the way she talked, plain and warm, and seeing clear through to the middle of a man. The very first line in that careful hand was this: "Henry, my love, I know." I sat very still. She knew. She had known all of it, all along. She had pieced together about Granary years before and known exactly who I built it to bring down. She had known about Roland Ashby and the valley he took from my father since long before she ever married me. And then she wrote the thing I had spent 40 years never knowing she carried. Ashby had asked her to be his wife all those years ago, and she had told him no. She wrote it with no pride at all, only sorrow. "I think I broke something in that man that day that was already cracked," she wrote. "And I have watched it spend 40 years breaking you in return. That is the part I cannot forgive myself for. Henry. Not him. Me." And then she told me what she had truly wanted all along. "I never once needed you to win. I need you to hear me say that. I did not need that valley back. I did not need to see that man brought low. I had a good house and a good man and a good life. And the only thing I ever wanted that I could not have was for you to set it down. The hating. I watched it sit at our table like a third supper for 30 years, taking pieces of you that should have been mine and your son's. I used to pray you would wake one morning and simply let it go and be only mine. Before our time ran out, the page was wet, and I understood that it was me because our time had run out. She had spent the years of her life waiting for me to come all the way home, and I never had. I gave the best of my heart to a dead man's debt and a living man's ruin, and gave her what was left. And by the time I set the hatred down, by the time I stood in that glass tower and walked away clean, she was 3 years in the ground and could not see it. I had done the one thing she ever asked of me, and done it too late for her to know. That is a particular kind of grief, friends, and I will not dress it up pretty. There is no court, no verdict, that returns the ordinary suppers and quiet evenings. The years a man wastes staring into an old wound while the love of his life waits at the table. I won everything I set out to win. And I understood, there in the dark, that the winning had cost me the one thing I would have traded all of it to keep. For 30 years I told myself, I did this for my father, for justice. And there was truth in that. But Ruth saw the truth underneath it. The hating had been easier than the grieving. As long as I had a man to bring down, I never had to sit still and feel how much it hurt to lose her, or my father, or to be a man who once chose ambition over his own blood. The war had been a place to hide, and she had spent her whole gentle life trying to call me up out of it and home, while there was still a home to come to. I sat out there until the sky over the wheat went from black to gray to a thin and tender gold. Somewhere in that long night, I made my peace. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind, the only kind that holds. When the light came up, I went inside. Adam slept in the front room, Grace beside him. And upstairs in the small bed that had been my son's, little Eli slept with one arm thrown over his head, the way the very young do. Certain down to their bones the world is a safe place. I stood in that doorway a while and watched him breathe. The old book says that now abide faith, hope, and love. These three. And the greatest of these is love. I had spent 30 years certain the greatest thing was justice. I had it wrong. Justice is good, and the Lord knows this world is starved for more of it. But justice was never going to save me. The thing that could save me was breathing in that small bed, waking in the next room, and lying under a stone in the churchyard with my whole heart still wrapped around her name. So I will leave you with the one thing I would give anything to have known sooner. If there is a hatred you carry, some old wound you have nursed so long it feels like a part of you, think hard on what it costs you to hold it. Not the one you cannot forgive. You. And the living at your table tonight, waiting for you to come all the way home while there is still time. Set it down. Give it to God, and let Him carry what was always His. And go love the living while they are still here to be loved. That is what she had been trying to tell me. It took me 40 years and the losing of her to hear it. The valley is green again this spring. My son heals the sick. My grandson runs laughing through the wheat, and every evening, when the work is in, I walk out to a quiet stone in the churchyard, sit with my wife as the sun goes red over the fields, and tell her about our day. I am late. God knows I am late, but I am home now, Ruth. All the way home, at last.